Hello and a warm welcome to Living the Dream French Riviera, the podcast where we explore women's professional journeys while relocating to the south of France. I'm your host, Cecile Liconnet. Today's guest is Kirsti, whose path to the south of France was anything but planned. She never set out to live here, and yet, over the years, she has built a life through constant reinvention. In this episode, we talk about navigating relocation without speaking the language and the very real impact that has on both daily life and professional opportunities. Kirsti shares what it means to build, pause, pivot, and begin again in a place where communication itself can be the biggest barrier. Kirsti, thank you so much for being here today. Your journey is a fascinating one, from years of travel to settling on the French Riviera, and from hands-on bodywork through massage and yoga to a much deeper exploration bridging psychology and spirituality. On this podcast, we talk about living the dream, exploring what it really means to build a meaningful life after relocation. In your work, you speak about living in truth, not as an endpoint, but as an ongoing process. I'm really looking forward to exploring how those two ideas meet in your life and what your journey has taught you along the way. Let's start by getting to know the beginning of your story before France, before the work you do today.
So I moved here in 2008. But I had been here for the previous 2 summers. I was working on the yachts. I'd been mostly based in America. My husband and I decided that we wanted to be a little bit closer to England. So we came over and I rented an apartment in the summer in Antibes for 2 summers in a row before we moved here in 2008. So I dipped my toe in the water to experience a little bit of France before we came. I didn't want to move to France. It wasn't a dream. I always planned to go back and live in Devon in the southwest of England. When I finished traveling, that's where my heart was. I was absolutely sure that that's what I was doing. That was my dream. But my husband, although he's English, he had been living in the Caribbean, and it was his dream to go back and live in the Caribbean. So when we met, there was a bit of a clash there, and there had to be a compromise for both of us. And there was no chance of getting him back to England. It's just way too cold for him. So we had a toss-up between Palma de Mallorca and the south of France. We both loved Palma, but the decision to come to France in the end was Palma as an island. Didn't want to get island fever. In the south of France, we could drive all over Europe. It's such a central location in Europe that we love camper vans, so we could explore all of Europe from the south of France without even needing to get a ferry or anything like that. And we could drive back to England too. That was a massive deciding factor in relocating from America to the south of France. It was exciting. After traveling a lot, I've lived in a lot of different places and sort of had temporary residences, so living 6 months or 8 months in different countries. So I loved that. I loved exploring cultures and new places. So that was exciting for me. The first time I came to the south of France, I arrived by boat after doing an Atlantic crossing. I will never forget it because we came in on a beautiful late spring morning into the port of Nice. I was mesmerised. It was so beautiful. It was absolutely stunning. I'll never forget sailing in and just seeing all the beautiful buildings and the colours, all those pinks, and I love those colours. So I'll never forget that. And then I spent the summer here, working here, and I loved it. It was a lot of fun. I was very much based around Antibes, but I was still very much a yachtie, living in the yacht world. So I was still working on the boats, but I had a base here. After that summer, back over to the Caribbean for a Caribbean season. Came back the following summer and had an absolute blast. I loved it. It's just so beautiful. Flew in the next time. And, when you come out of Nice Airport and the backdrop of the mountains in the spring with still a little bit of snow on the top, it's beautiful. South France is absolutely stunning. So I did another summer here, still working on the boat, and back to the Caribbean and America for the winter. And then finally, we packed up all our stuff in America, flew to England, packed up a van in England and drove down to south of France. We needed an apartment, which I could not find for the life of me. We ended up renting an apartment off somebody that a friend of a friend's, if you like. So that made it easier. And it was just a temporary thing. It was just supposed to be for a few months. We ended up staying there for, I think, 2.5 years. It was the longest that either of us had ever stayed in one location. We needed a bank account. We needed paperwork. We didn't have any of the necessary paperwork. So we had to go off to a bank that somebody had recommended to us that was easier to get a bank account in this place because we didn't have the necessary paperwork. We managed to get the bank account. Once we had a bank account, it was much easier to get other things. I remember we ended up with a parking ticket that was like 300 or 400 euros, something like this, or a speeding fine. By the time we received it, it was about 600 euros or something crazy like that. And the reason was, in the first week that we lived in the apartment, we had not changed the name on the mailbox in the hallway downstairs. So when the speeding fine, because that was another thing actually, there seemed to be speeding cameras everywhere here. There were no speeding cameras at that time in America, so they were everywhere here. It was a rental car, and because we didn't have the name on our mailbox for that first week, it had got returned to the car rental place, and it had done the rounds a little bit before it finally got sent back to us. Our name was on the mailbox, and we ended up with a 500 euro parking ticket. And then we had to try to fix this situation without paying the 500, but we didn't speak French. So there was a lot of things when we first got here that, just cultural differences and not speaking the language that was really hard. We came from America, everything was 24-hour. The pharmacy was 24-hour, the bookshop, everything was 24-hour. We came here and big shops, like the big hardware shops, were closed for siesta. We had a problem with the car. The garage was closed for the month of August. It was so difficult to get our head around this adjustment from America, everything's 24/7, to France, it's like everything closes at 11:45 or 12 o'clock for 2.5, 3 hours for lunch. You've got these tiny little windows to get out and do what you need to do. Otherwise, everything's shut. Everything was shut on Sundays. Nothing was open on a Sunday. So that was a huge adjustment for us. That availability of everything at the drop of a hat in America to, Sunday is sacred family time, if you like. That was something that I grew to love. We literally had a few words of French between us. I have to say, on the Côte d'Azur, there are a lot of people that speak English, but for me, the language has been one of the biggest challenges, both not speaking it and learning it. When I first got here, I did a French immersion language course, and I sat next to somebody on the first morning in the class, and she said, "I've been here for 20 years, and I don't speak a single word of French." And this did not compute in my head at all. I couldn't imagine how somebody could live in a country and not speak a single word for 20 years. I've been here for 17 years. I can speak, I can communicate, I can read most of the bureaucratic letters that come through the door, but I am in no way sort of conversational at a dinner party around the table, understanding everything. That has been a challenge for me, and I've done countless lessons. I've dedicated hours and hours and hours to learning French. I learned much later that there was support for learning French. I definitely wish I'd known that before.
Moving to a new country comes with a lot of unknowns, especially when it comes to work. Let's talk about your professional journey. Had you anticipated how you'd make a living before you settled here in France?
If I'm honest, I really hadn't put that much thought into that sort of stuff. I was a massage therapist on the boats. I knew that I could do that, but long-term plans I hadn't really thought about. I hadn't really thought about the reality of getting work when I couldn't speak French. I remember when I first came here, as a massage therapist, I'd studied aromatherapy. I'd learned all about grass many years before. So when I came here, I wanted to go straight to the perfumeries, and I fell in love with them. And so I asked them about getting a job there, and the answer was a very straight no, because the only language I speak is English. The lady there said, "So you don't speak French?" "No." "You don't speak Italian?" "Russian, German, Spanish?" "No."
She tried.
So I hadn't really put that much thought to it. I was still working on boats for the first 2 years. I knew that I wanted to get off the boats. It was a natural progression to continue to do massage therapy. I was also a yoga instructor, so I rented a small studio in Antibes just to do one-on-one. It wasn't big enough to do big classes. And then I decided to add another feather to my bow, and I trained to be a hypnobirthing teacher. That was all going well. At the time, it was 2010. I set up a website. It was fairly easy. There was a steep learning curve, but within a very short amount of time, I was dominating the Google page, 1, 2 for massage and yoga and hypnobirthing for Côte d'Azur keywords. I was also doing leaflet drops all around the ports. The things that were a challenge when I set up that business were getting insurance. I also had done an acupuncture course, but it's not the same system as in England. Acupuncture is a very grey area in France because you're piercing the skin. You have to be a GP or something like this. So I was not able to practice the acupuncture legally. There are some routes that people go around, and some people just take the fine and close down shop and then reopen. That wasn't a direction that I wanted to go in. I continued doing the massage, the yoga and the hypnobirthing.
Your French hadn't improved in that short time. Who were your clients then?
Although I had done a couple of weeks of French immersion, for anybody that's lived here and learnt French, they'll know that it takes more than a couple of weeks to learn a language. Most of my clients were from the Anglophone community and from the yachting community. I did have French clients. They spoke English, but as I got to know them and shared with them that I was trying to learn French, they would suggest that I teach them yoga in French. And so I would start the class with a relaxation, as I always do, but this time in French. And I'd be met with giggles from the yoga mat from my French clients who thought it was hilarious. And they were totally unable to relax. And so I had to revert to speaking English again. But I do remember I got a job in a gym teaching yoga. The first time I went with my cheat sheet, language sheet that I had underneath the corner of my yoga mat, and it was very much levez les bras, comme ça, et comme ça, et maintenant comme ça. So this is one of the difficult things, not being able to speak enough French, that it massively limits and has always limited my pool of potential clients. And I think that's one of the big challenges or struggles that I've had on the Côte d'Azur. With massage, it's not a problem, it's very basic, but with the hypnobirthing and the work that I do now, my lack of French fluency is a problem.
Would you say that The fact that you can go by on the Côte d'Azur without French has stopped you from learning French because you were not forced to learn French.
Exactly. That's exactly. It's brilliant that so many people speak English. I can go and see a doctor, I can see a dentist, I can see somebody at the bank, I can see a notaire, a lawyer, whatever I need, all the official things. I can go into a shop. You can always find somebody that speaks English, mostly. On the flip side, yeah, I haven't been forced to speak French. All my clients have been Anglophones. This has massively restricted my daily practice. One of the things I found was I was going for lessons, 2 lessons a week, religiously for months and months and months. I was learning plus que parfait and all sorts of tenses. And then I would meet my neighbour on the street and couldn't have a conversation about the weather. Many of my friends who had children here, every day they were at the school gates, 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon, conversing with other parents in French. And just that 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon was enough that over the years consolidated their French. I'd never had that sort of immersion.
When you set up your business, how did you discover if you could be self-employed in France?
I'd spoken to a few people. I understood that I needed to set myself up, what was called a micro-entreprise or auto-entrepreneur in those days. Without speaking French, I knew that this was not going to be possible myself. So I had to pay somebody. And actually, when we first got here, I would quite often pay a translator or somebody to help me with paperwork or challenging things. I remember getting some things to do with the house, regulations and things made no sense to me, so I had to get a translator for that. I used a company that I still use today to set up my auto-entreprise. They do my tax as well. They do our taxes. So that's how I got around that. It's quite difficult because in France, they want to put you in a little box. So teaching yoga, doing massage and teaching hypnobirthing are 3 very different things. And you have to be in the right box, but all 3 of those don't fit into one box. It's quite rigid. I find it quite rigid. I had no idea. Like all of a sudden, letters are coming through the door. I couldn't understand any of them. The company that I'd used to set up, the auto-entrepreneur, gave me sort of printouts of, okay, if you get emails from these people, ignore them. If you get emails from these people, pay attention. So I really had no idea. There were things with the French health system before I got my carte vitale, that I had to send off the receipts from the doctors, those little brown forms. You had to send those somewhere. And things would just get put away in a filing box. It was so overwhelming, even with that support. I've just found it all so overwhelming. It literally took me years and years to get my head around that stuff. And I'd say probably only in the last 5 years have I started actually logging on to the tax website myself. I never even logged onto the site. Now my French is at a level that I can manage with that sort of stuff. There is definitely a lot of cultural things that I did not expect. France and England are so close, just a small sea between us, and the culture so similar, which I think makes it so much easier to move here compared to, countries like India or Thailand or something. There's so much similar in the culture, but there's some nuances in the culture that you just don't realise until you've already messed up. For example, not saying bonjour when you walk into a shop. And all sorts of nuances on the road. It takes time to get your head around those, to learn those, to understand those, and not to judge them. I think a lot of people judge those nuances, but it's just a different way of doing things. And I think a lot of people expect those nuances not to be there, or for the cultures to be exactly the same, apart from the fact that in France they eat croissants. But it's not. It has a different history. There's a brilliant book. It's called The Secret Life of France. And I read that book and it helped me massively to understand those nuances, that there is a different culture because they have a different history. And now I appreciate that. For example, I think French people can be a little bit closed until you get to know them. Whereas American people, they're very open, straight out there. I think a lot of people that move here sort of judge that harshly. Maybe it comes from the Second World War where France was occupied. We didn't have that in America or in England. And so there are these nuances, but when you start to understand them, you know, when you do get to know a French person, then they're so warm. All my neighbours here are just absolutely lovely. Most of them.
So you have your little business, you're doing well, you're well referenced on internet, yet at some point you decided to evolve. You decided to explore the intersection of psychology and spirituality. Yeah. How did this happen?
A few things happened. With the hypnobirthing, I find it really, really difficult. Birthing in France compared to England and some other European countries is very over-medicalised. It's frowned upon to have a home birth. Not that you need a home birth when you're hypnobirthing, but a lot of people do choose to have home birth when they hypnobirth. It's frowned upon. It's very difficult to do the natural birthing, and that was hitting up a lot of resistance between what I was saying as a hypnobirthing practitioner and what the obstetricians were saying. That was a battle that I was not prepared to fight myself. So hypnobirthing wasn't going so well for me. I wasn't enjoying it. The other thing is that coming from yachts, I had a very short commute down the crew mess corridor to work every day. I had moved to Grasse, but my studio was still in Antibes and I hated commuting with all the traffic every day. So I moved up to Grasse and was working from home, doing the massage and the yoga. But I wasn't as well established up in the hills in Grasse as I was in Antibes, and it was a different, none of the yachting community was up in Grasse and weren't prepared to travel that distance. So I struggled with that. But I also knew in my heart that I didn't want to continue forever teaching yoga and doing massage. I knew that I wanted to work deeper with people on a more psychological level and a spiritual level. I'd been toying with the idea of studying psychology for many, many years. And I'd also come across transpersonal psychology, which was heaven for me because it was the combination of spirituality and psychology. It was spirituality seen through a psychological lens. You can only study that at master level, so that was the push I needed to study an undergraduate Bachelor of Science in Psychology. So I shut up shop, closed my auto-entrepreneur, and registered with Open University in England, which is an online university. They've been doing distant learning degrees for 50 years, over 50 years now. I became a full-time student. I had no idea how that was going to go. I hadn't been to university before. I didn't know whether I'd take to academia. It turns out I loved it. I think if I'd gone to university when I was younger, I would have become a forever student and stayed in academia my whole life. So I studied 3 years, an undergraduate in psychology, and then I went straight on from there and studied transpersonal psychology and did a master's in that, which was another 3 years, which I absolutely loved. I loved every minute of it. Turns out I'm a geek and I love nothing more than to be in the online library and have my head stuck in research papers, reading what the actual scientific evidence is for theories and concepts around psychology and spirituality. Part of the reason that I took this move, because it was a big move to study for 6 years, and part of the reason of that was spirituality and wellness started becoming a lot more mainstream. And I started to see a lot of people touched personally by wellness, yoga, meditation, that sort of thing. When you're touched in that way, you just want to share it with people. I think there were a lot of people changing their careers later in life, going out into the world, teaching this thing, but not really knowing much about it. They hadn't walked the path, they hadn't lived it. It touched them briefly and they wanted to share that and get out into the world and share it. And I think there's a lot of people out there that have, I'm not saying they haven't eaten, slept and breathed it, but they've only been doing that for a year, so their understanding is not that deep. And I see a lot of people online, especially, but locally also, promising a lot from wellness and spirituality. But the reality is that transformation can take a lot of dedication to change our habits, to work through our traumas and our behaviours. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes dedication and commitment to practices. Studying, actually my master's was consciousness, spirituality and transpersonal psychology. That really enabled me to get to the root, to see what the evidence says about certain practices, what we can grasp spiritually that is evidence-based, and what is what I call airy-fairy spirituality. What's really going to make a difference to our lives? And how does that transformation evolve?
Your work touches areas that some people find deeply meaningful and others approach with skepticism. How do you navigate credibility, especially in a region with many wellness practitioners?
Yeah, so that's really why I went to do the masters, for that credibility. It's funny, having studied transpersonal psychology for 3 years, even people in my family still don't really fully grasp what transpersonal psychology is. In my studies, I studied mystical experiences. It sounds woo-woo and airy-fairy, but there's actually a growing body of research into the therapeutic benefits of mystical experiences. When I talk to people on the Côte d'Azur about my research that I had published and my areas of interest and what I do, when I first say, well, transpersonal psychology is a fancy name for spiritual psychology, I kind of get these eyes rolling and, she's off with the fairies. What very often happens, that the more I start talking about it, people start relating to experiences that they've maybe never shared before or that they'd overlooked as a significant experience in their life. And also when I talk about the research side of it, presenting the research, the rigorous academic side of it, I'm still a peer reviewer for a transpersonal coaching journal. I've had my research published. I'm very grounded in the spirituality, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to study it. It's really important that it's grounded and practical. When people start to hear me talking about it, they can see very quickly that it's an evidence-based approach, and I'm very grounded in that spirituality. I'm not selling this sort of airy-fairy spirituality that you so often see.
So after you've done your 6 years training, you need to open a practice again. How does it work this time?
I was faced with a decision as to set up my own website, write my own blogs, get to the top of the Google searches again, which I knew after a 6-year break, and actually 10 years since I'd set up my first website, that there were billions more websites on Google fighting for the #1 positions, and it could take me years to get anywhere, if I could get anywhere at all. On the flip side, I realised very quickly that I could write for other people and get paid instantly. So that's what I did. I started writing for other people. I was writing other people's blogs, working for other wellness enterprises and businesses across the world, and writing their blogs for them. What this enabled me to do was to learn about search engine optimization and where the internet was today. That was all going very well. I'd set up a new auto-entrepreneur, at which point I discovered that I could do some intensive French courses, whittled down my client base to my best clients, and I did a 2-month French intensive. Over that 2 months, ChatGPT arrived on the scene. And I'd looked at ChatGPT about 2 months before I started the French intensive, and I saw the quality of writing and it was terrible. So I wasn't worried. It wasn't a problem for me. However, 4 months later, when I was coming out the other side of the 2-month intensive, it had massively improved. The writing quality on there was excellent. Although I still had my core of my clients, I wasn't able to pick up new contracts because small enterprises that I was writing for were now using ChatGPT. Gradually over the next 6 months, I also lost the core of my writing clients. They also moved over to ChatGPT. That was a real shock for me. I had to pivot again. I had to work out where to go from here. I was already seeing people for minor sort of feelings of sadness or depressed thoughts and that sort of thing. Psychological well-being without moving into, because I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I don't work with mental health problems. So I thought, okay, internet's very hard. I'd also, before, when I'd first finished my studies, set up an Instagram account and went down the social media route before I realised that that's also very difficult to make any headway on social media without paying for adverts and things. So I thought, well, if it's so hard to go out into the world and big, then I will just come back closer to the local community. And I felt that that was what people also wanted post-COVID. I felt people wanted human connection. They were fed up of being online, fed up of Zoom calls and that sort of thing. But the reality is that the world had changed. Before, when I first got here, I just put a listing on Anglo Info, and that was enough. You know, with my Google and Anglo Info and a few leaflet drops, it was enough. Now people weren't using those methods that I'd used before, were no longer working. And I found that there's a stigma still today about getting support and help, which I think is really sad, because on the extreme you have people that have a diagnosis of mental health problems such as clinical depression and clinical anxiety, that sort of thing. But there's a long way before people get to that point, but there's very little support before they get to that support point. And certainly within the health system and the free health system, there's no support. So people have to pay for my services themselves, but because there's a stigma about getting support for these sort of things, while I thought that my business would grow word of mouth, people don't tend to go around shouting about how they've got support for psychological well-being. So I was struggling to build clientele. At the same time, I don't really like to put myself out there. I'm not a public speaker. That's not really my thing. I thought maybe that's the way that I could get the word out there about what I do and what I offer, but I didn't want to put myself out there and start doing talks and presentations and stuff, because it's just not my thing. So I had to pivot again. Something was calling me to come back to my transpersonal studies, to what I'd spent 6 years studying, to my passion, to what I really believed in. It's so niche, working with people on the spiritual path is so niche that it's not enough to just focus locally, especially when I don't speak French. So I'm limiting myself because I don't speak French, and then the niche that I'm working in is limiting even more, and there's just not enough clients that speak English on the Côte d'Azur that might need my services. So I had to open it up to the world again. This time I didn't choose a social media route. I loved writing. That's one thing that I discovered through writing well-being blogs for other people, is that I actually loved writing. But now, instead of writing well-being, I was writing spirituality and all things transpersonal, and I'm in my element. It makes me so happy. I absolutely love it. So that's what I did. I started writing blogs. I had to learn and go deeper into search engine optimization and how the Google Search Console and Google Analytics work. And it's been a massive learning curve over the last year to get my head around all that technical stuff. I'm not very technically minded. It's been a journey, but I'm
now ranking on Google in some good positions. I've got some good positions on Google and I'm getting clients in through the door. It's still early days, but they're coming. I'm getting regular clients and I'm loving what I do. I'm super looking forward to 2026. I really feel like all the hard work from all the years of studying, all the last year of teaching myself about the business side of it is going to start paying off. And there's still so much more to learn. It's interesting actually, because where ChatGPT killed my writing business, it's now supporting me in my new business because I'm learning a lot through ChatGPT about things like Google Search Console and marketing and that sort of thing. I think in life sometimes, I felt for many years that I was butting up. It's like trying this, not working, trying this, not working, trying this, not working. And I feel like now I've actually followed my passion rather than thinking, okay, what do I need to do to earn money? I've actually just come back to myself. It's like, what do I want to focus on? What do I want to write about? What do I want to do? And, it was a hope and a dream, really. I had no idea whether I would find clients. I'm writing about transpersonal psychology. I'm writing about Kundalini awakenings. I'm writing about spiritual awakenings, dark night of the soul, spiritual death, all sorts of subjects that most people have never even heard of these concepts and terms. I had no idea whether there would be a market for them, honestly. But I just had to write what I loved and what I knew and what I'd studied. Fingers crossed it's going to pay off.
It must be very conflicting to be doing what you're doing and having to act like a business person when your core activity is nothing like business.
Yes, I've never identified as a businesswoman. And even when I was teaching yoga and doing the massage and the hypnobirthing, because the business side that I had to do actually took up a lot less time and was much easier and more basic, I didn't see myself as a businesswoman primarily then. I saw myself as a yoga teacher or a massage therapist. Now I've had to embrace the idea of business. Actually, we can say I'm an entrepreneur. That doesn't sit comfortably with me. It's so at odds with how I've always perceived myself. But it's bringing out a side of me that I never knew existed. I like it, actually. I actually do these things about the numbers and the data that I love. And I guess maybe I discovered that love when I was a student and I was poring over data when I was doing my 3 research projects into mystical experiences. They were all quantitative, they were all survey-based. I was getting my head around the data. And that's a whole new side of me that is completely at odds with my spiritual side, if you like, that I never knew existed. I've grown in that respect. It's been against my will, but I feel actually more a whole person, more well-rounded. As a complementary therapy type practitioner, and I think there's a lot of complementary therapy type practitioners out there that will resonate with this, business is not something that comes naturally to us. We don't tend to be money orientated. You don't go into these caring professions to make millions. It's another part of me has had to flourish, to be comfortable charging what I charge and to do the business side of it and to enjoy the business side of it and flourish in that. And I love that. But I've also done a lot of courses in the last few years on marketing, but marketing from a spiritual perspective. Now I like it. There's a phrase, selling is spiritual work, something like this. And it's true because I have clients that really need my support. They really, really need my support. And it's not easy to find the support that I offer. There's not many people out there doing it. And it's very difficult to find the people that are because they're repelled against all the business side. They don't want to sit in front of a computer all day long. So it's really important that the people that need my services can find me. So embracing the marketing side, embracing the business side is actually serving my potential clients in the highest way that I can, really. It's strange.
This brings us nicely to our next section, reflection and personal growth. Looking back on your journey, I imagine there are things you see differently now. If you could do it all over again, is there anything you'd like to change?
Yes! I was so naive. Going to live in another country for 6 months is not the same as permanently relocating to another country. And I think when you're going to live in another country for 6 months, it's more like an extended holiday. And the reality of relocating to a country where you don't speak the language is very different. If I lived it all over again, the very first thing that I would have done when I arrived in France was go to the Pôle emploi and get support, because as a socialist country, there's actually a lot of support. I would have probably dedicated the first year I was here to learning French and making that the priority, because I realise now that that's probably the most important thing about relocating to another country. I actually always said before I met my husband that I would never live in a country where English wasn't the first language. So I knew that somewhere in me. I was here for 10 years before I went to the Pôle emploi. They put me on French intensive courses and the service was amazing. They were so supportive. They recommended me to go on a French immersive. It was absolutely amazing. It was 2 months. I'm so grateful for that support. When I got to the end of the first 2-month French intensive, they advised me to go on to another one. They put me on another French intensive. I would have loved to have continued doing that, but it was not an option. I had clients and my workload was building up. If I had my time again, I would have made learning French, doing an immersive French course. Actually, I might even have not moved to the Côte d'Azur first. I might have moved somewhere where it's not so multicultural, multilingual, where there's a much... I think I would have moved somewhere where everybody didn't speak English, just for 6 months or maybe a year, so that I could learn French. I was forced to learn French, like somewhere where I couldn't survive not speaking French, and then move to the Côte d'Azur. I think that's probably the biggest thing for me that I would have done differently.
Can you share a moment that made you feel especially proud, something that truly marked a success in your relocation journey?
When I cracked a joke in French.
Congratulations! I don't think I can do this in English. In French either.
Yeah, I think I was in a shop and there was a few people. There was a desk in the shop, and a couple of people laughed, and that was definitely a moment for me.
Impressive achievement. How do you think your life might have unfolded if you hadn't made the move?
I think that's a difficult one, because I was working in yachting for 10 or 12 years before I came here. So my life was already transient. I think my life would have been very different in England. I always love walking wherever I am. And I love England. It's beautiful for walking. But Côte d'Azur is stunning. I feel like I have a very rich life here. It's rich socially. There's a great social life here. Like, I'm in my 50s and I think I have a fantastic social life here that I'm not sure that I would have that in England. I think people lean heavily into the social life here because they've not got their families here. People don't have their friends that they grew up with. And my social life here revolves around some amazing activities on the Côte d'Azur. For example, walking. It's just absolutely stunning here. Pickleball, cold water swimming or paddleboarding. The sun, the weather enables you to have such an outdoor active life. It's not so easy in England. It's raining too much.
What advice would you give to someone who feels they're at the beginning of a transformation like the one you've experienced?
A relocation transformation.
Or a spiritual transformation?
Stay grounded. Actually, for either kind of transformation, being embodied, so mindfulness, staying in the present moment, breathing through the present moment. For whatever's arising, we have inner peace in each one of us. We're able to access that inner peace. And the quickest, easiest way to access inner peace is through the breath. Whether you're going through a spiritual transformation or a relocation transformation, there will be challenges and highs and lows and times where you just want to pull your hair out and scream. And I think always coming back to the breath and regulating yourself with the breath and tuning in to yourself and to what's arising in the moment, and just being present with that as an observer helps us to cope with whatever's arising.
Wonderful. Before we wrap up, let's look at life on the Riviera, a place that inspires countless dreams. What is it truly like to live here? Is life on the Riviera as glamorous as it seems?
Oh, well, there is so much glamour here. There is so much glamour here. You only have to go down to the front in Cannes to see that, or Monaco. There are definitely aspects of glamour. For me, what interests me much more, because it wasn't the glamour that attracted me to the Côte d'Azur, is the natural beauty here. That's absolutely stunning. We are nestled between sea and mountains. We have the best of all worlds. We ski in the winter. We can hike all year round. So, is life glamorous? Well, yes and no. When we have our family come down from England and stay and they see this wonderful life, we show them the Côte d'Azur and we start the day with croissants in the morning, and it's all just absolutely gorgeous and beautiful and wonderful. They imagine that our life is one continuous holiday. The reality is that living in a foreign country comes with all the challenges of living in your home country, and on top of that you have the cultural challenges and the language challenges.
Which place is the most iconic on the Riviera, in your opinion?
I'm probably not the best person to ask this question to. Can I answer a different question of my favourite places?
Sure.
From my bedroom window here I can see Côte, and when you stand on top of Côte and you see the whole of the Riviera beneath you, there's something magical about that, and it's absolutely beautiful. So it's not an iconic place, but it's beautiful. It's a little bit of a hike up there, but I highly recommend it. If you live on the Côte d'Azur now and you've never been there, you should get it somewhere. You don't have to go to the summit to see the Côte d'Azur, but it's quite a spectacular view from up there. It's a very special place, the Côte d'Azur, and it's beautiful. The glamour, we tend to think of the glamour around sort of Cannes and Monaco, and the Côte d'Azur is known for that worldwide, for the artists, for the film festival, for the boat shows, for all of this glamour. But the real beauty of the Côte d'Azur for me is the natural beauty. The Pre-Alps is just stunning. There's so many walks to go and explore here, and every one of them is beautiful. The terrain is different. We have all these little microclimates here. Every valley is different. Every peak is different. For me, that's the magic of the Côte d'Azur, is that natural beauty.
Wonderful, Kirsti. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. Your journey from life traveling to your deep evolving work in well-being is truly inspiring. I've loved hearing about each stage of your path, and I'm grateful for your openness and insight. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Cecile. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode, and to Kirsti for sharing her story so openly. And to you, our listeners, thank you. If you have enjoyed these stories, please share, follow and like. The show needs it more than ever to be discovered. You can find more about our guests on our website, livingthedreampodcast.com, where you will also find a link to support the podcast. This marks the final episode of our very first season. It has been an absolute joy to share the authentic stories of these incredible women who made the bold move and reinvented their professional lives here on the Riviera. Each story has been a powerful illustration that living the dream is rarely a straight line. It is built through resilience, adaptation, and often starting again. If you are discovering the podcast through the latest episodes, do take the time to go back and explore the earlier ones. There are some truly special stories waiting there. The guest list for season 2 is already looking incredibly exciting, with many more stories of courage, transformation, and reinvention to come. So do stay with us, be a little patient, and hopefully we will reconnect very soon for season 2. A heartfelt thank you to Claire Long for the beautiful music as she embarks on her own new chapter, heading back to the UK. We wish her all the very best and hope she will continue to create and share her music. Until then, thank you for listening to Living the Dream, Women, Work and Relocation on the French Riviera. À bientôt! Do you have a favorite place or a hidden gem you want to share?